I'm sharing a reading experience. I'm reading from a book entitled For James, and I'm sharing it with you now. Today I'll go through the second part of the chapter called Faith. I hope you listen and receive something worthwhile from this. This video might inspire you to read this book. It's my hope that you'll search from the best books and gain information and ideas to help you to become a better person. The more you read, the better you'll think. And the better you think, the more you'll be able to face life's challenges successfully. Faith, pleasure, or lasting happiness. When Jesus said in Matthew 4:18 through 22, "Follow me," Peter, Andrew, James, and John stopped doing the only thing they had ever known and started walking with Jesus. Now their lives would never be the same. Following Jesus Christ takes faith, not knowledge. Following the Savior is never done with a perfect knowledge, but if we exercise faith and follow Him, we will eventually receive a fullness of truth. Faith is the anchor in our lives. Faith keeps us from drifting in the ocean of doubt, falling in the trap made for us by doubting over and over with repeated need for proof means we're not able to commit to the truth and follow Christ in faith. In John 20:27, Thomas was given the evidence he asked for, and then Christ demanded that he be believing. The world, controlled by Satan, teaches us to constantly raise questions, be cynical, and look out for number one. And, of course, seek the next thrill that's more exciting than the last. Satan wants us to be the animal controlled by appetite. The preached desires of the world are food, alcohol, drugs, immoral behavior, revenge, fame, riches, and possessions. The dangers of these, besides being obese, senseless, STDs, enemies, narcissism, taxes, and clutter, is a hollow existence. A satisfying life doesn't come from being sluggishly stuffed or being high as a kite or neglectful to those that need us or doing things that hurt our health. A life worth living comes through our meaningful pursuits and in our relationships. And when we do the things which gladness requires, the agony of growth occurs. Long-term joy requires us in the short term to study the scriptures, go to church, pray, care for our families, be responsible, forgive others and ourselves, keep promises, maintain our living spaces, go to the doctor and dentist, save money, eat right, stay fit, visit family, and a variety of other daily, tiring efforts. The honor is not so much the accomplishment of our goal as much as the struggle to get there. The struggle is what makes you strong and capable. Failing obligations in order to be idle or to do selfish acts can leave you sick and worried. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you work long, hard hours, you will find yourself a stranger to family, friends, and your community, while all the while being no more secure or happy. Please think about how your choices connect you to the important people in your life, your family, and your friends. Next, you need to make a distinction between the things that bring lasting happiness versus those things that are temporary. This is the world's teaching. There is no meaning beyond the pleasure of the moment, and that pleasure is extended by variety, a new drug, a new perversion, and so forth. This is the Lord's teaching. Have faith to follow God. Believing in God and having faith to follow Him are two different things. If you've ever read James 2:19, you would know that even the devils believe, but they don't have faith to follow Him. Faith, not knowledge, gives us confidence, focus, willpower, and allows us to act without stiffness. We are willing to cross the road because we believe others will yield for our right of way. Faith leads us to expect a positive outcome, even in the midst of negative circumstances. Gabrielle Shizawa's article, Why Grief is My Greatest Teacher, stated, quote, my grief carved a space in my soul for me to understand something I have never comprehended before. Faith is about trusting God and putting our lives in His loving hands, even if we don't understand why He does what He does. Faith is trusting that His plan is better than ours, that He sees the full staircase when we can't even see the next step. Unquote. But before we can have faith, we must be willing to have faith. In the 1976 movie The Shootist, Gillum Rogers, played by Ron Howard, asks, how can you get into so many fights and always come out on top? J.B. Brooks, played by John Wayne, replies, I found out early that most men, regardless of cause or need, blink an eye or draw a breath before they pull a trigger. I won't. The shootist ends his lesson by telling Gillum that it isn't being fast or accurate that counts, it's being willing. It's the willingness that carries us to the next step. Life is not made of haves and have-nots. Life is made up of will and will-nots. Do you have faith, or do you think you need to know first? Deuteronomy 29:29 tells us there are some things that we're not meant to know or understand in this life. What will often happen is a surprise ending, or life will remain a mystery. Being willing to let go of what we want to know and accomplish so God can do His thing is an expression of faith. The faith I'm talking about doesn't mean you believe things will work out the way you want. What we think we want is often not the best thing for us. What I'm referring to is a faith in a God-given life as it unfolds to curiously teach us. We just never know in what form our blessings will come from or how things will turn out. There's nothing wrong with having great expectation as long as we have a minimal attachment to the outcome. Letting go and letting God do His thing means that we trust in the process without necessarily understanding it. We will not be able to stop the problems that keep interrupting us, but we can learn how to successfully ride with them until they're over. Many people try to numb themselves to life's tragedies. Don't do that. Just remember to remember God in your trials and difficulties. That retrospect transforms everything that happens into a solemn experience. You don't need to seek special spiritual experiences because they already surround us. All you need to do is recognize them. Once we begin to have faith to follow, we try to gain understanding of what we're doing. Gaining understanding about spiritual matters is like putting together a 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. The more you put together, the more you see. It's tedious, long work. Figuring out if you have the pieces or you have pieces that don't fit into the grand scheme of things is also difficult. There are different ways to find out about the pieces of the truth to your puzzle. Here are three: life experience, life experience of others, and revelation from God through faith. Without our spiritual truths, we're shackled and blindfolded. That's why truth is worth getting. That's why faith is worth having. If we absorb things that aren't true, it's like eating junk food. Junk may taste good, but it will leave you sick and weak. Things that aren't true distort our thinking, like a carnival mirror that turns reality into something that isn't. Mark Twain put it this way: it's not what a man knows that hurts him. It's what he thinks he knows that ain't so that hurts him. By the little hinges of decision, big doors open and close. By what door will your life swing? Will the door be marked by Caesar, where the curse of compromise and consensus is the only thing considered good and right? Will it be the door marked the circus, where the self seeking life demands the low and depraved? Will the door you open be marked by faith, where the true lawgiver is found? What are the standards by which you will govern your life? Finding truth has everything to do with being a true seeker. We say we want the truth, but in what ways do we look for it? A parched and thirsty man drinks water in a very different way than someone who has had their fill. In the same sense, the path on which we look for truth determines our readiness to see it. If we are put in a state of need, that state sensitizes our need and the help that we seek. More often than not, we're not really looking for truth. We seek truth every once in a while, like when we see death or a massive injustice, or maybe when we are looking up into the night sky and wonder how the universe came to be, or wonder if anyone is looking back at us. But those occasions go by and the quest for truth fades away. Random searching is not an actual search. Satan knows that we're creatures of habit. He knows that once he can get you or I into a certain way of thinking or doing, we'll likely be stuck there. Unless you genuinely search for a personal relationship with Christ, all you'll be able to see is the normal patterns and the abnormal patterns, but you won't be able to tell if these patterns are unhealthy patterns or healthy ones. In life, we often fantasize about having easy victories, but it's not that way. God gave his children of promise, Israel, the land of milk and honey, but they had to constantly fight for every square inch of that land, starting with the Battle of Jericho in 1405 BC until now. Likewise, we can all be children of promise, but we must fight every day for it. We like logic, order, and reason to understand things. Your reasons are logical, but does that mean you know which direction to go? No matter how logical, ordered, and reasonable your thinking is, all people are limited and don't comprehend the perspective of God. Every person needs to lay aside carnal reasoning if they expect spiritual discernment. The carnal mind would take us down the road of justice where sin and death wait. The carnal mind takes us away from the path of mercy and grace where the spirit of life is. Doubt is a choice which opposes God and replaces faith. Doubt takes us down a path where we should not be. Satan often plants doubt in the mind, hoping doubt will cause us to oppose God. We're unlikely to think doubt is wrong or powerful, but doubt is the first step in the opposition to God. What that old serpent planted was doubt in Eve by saying in Genesis 3:1, can it really be that God has said you should not eat from every tree of the garden? Doubt was created by Satan to destroy Eve's faith. He starts with small doubts. Those small doubts are like a small, deadly virus. Now you speak those small doubts, spreading the virus. And when you speak negatively, that old snake has multiplied his victories. Not only does he have you doubting, but now you're helping him kill many hopeful hearts. Proverbs 3:5 states, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. The basis for that trust in God is his authority. We can't understand why he allows trouble and heartache into our lives, but we can know that he is loving and trustworthy. If we don't believe this, we'll question his will when our situation doesn't match our expectations. That's why we've been told to lean not on our own understanding. Legitimate trust means we do what God wills because we trust him. We trust him to guide us even in the hard times. Trust means that we don't pick and choose, even when we don't understand or appreciate what's going on. We can still rely on God's eternal wisdom and respond with trust. We may think we know what's best for our happiness and prosperity, and those things might work for a while, but sooner or later we will pay the price for taking unsound diversions. This might be a good place to say, we're here to grow, and growth is painful. C.S. Lewis said this, quote, I didn't go into religion to make me happy. I always knew a bottle of port would do that. If you want religion to make you feel really comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity, unquote. The summation is this. Don't pray so you can win in the game of life. Pray that you can figure out the reasons for all of your blood, sweat, and tears so you can turn them into a crown of victory. The Israelites were constantly reminded of their shortcomings in the sight of God. God had made a covenant with Abraham because Abraham first had faith in God. It wasn't until hundreds of years later, after the Israelites became corrupted by the culture of Egypt, that commandments came through Moses. The commandments showed the people of Israel how impossible it was to live by works. They were taught that faith was a fundamental requirement for salvation, since their rituals and offerings did not result in God owing them any type of salvation. Old Testament salvation is the same as New Testament salvation. Ephesians 2:8 says, "For it is by grace that you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is a gift of God." Unquote. Works are only the evidence of salvation, not the cause. James 2:17 reminds us, quote, "Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." Unquote. Matthew 12:33 states, quote, "Make a tree good and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit." Unquote. An Israelite who believed they were a child of God produced fruit by following the law. Faith in Yahweh and loyalty to Yahweh were both indicators of salvation. What is the actual result of salvation then? The sins and transgressions of Israel were transferred to an innocent scapegoat as their atonement. God provided forgiveness by his grace, represented in Israel's sacrifices. But they didn't earn forgiveness. Colossians 2:14 proclaims, "God wiped out the charges that were against us for disobeying the law of Moses. He took them away and nailed them to the cross." Unquote. The book of James doesn't say our works merit salvation. James simply wants the reader to be able to discern true faith from false faith, because true belief is confirmed by actions. A slave has obedience out of fear, and fear is the opposite of faith. It's only by the grace of God we're saved, because we don't deserve being saved. We deserve death and hell. We obey out of love for God, now not out of fear of punishment. In John 14:15, Jesus said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, "If you want to go to heaven, keep the commandments." We obey because obedience is in the nature of love, not because of what we can get from God. We strive to keep the commandments so we can live closer to how God does, because we want to be more like him. The underlying message of many of the obedience themes in the world today is self-perfection. We're only perfect in Christ. Perfect is defined as being entirely without fault. Only Christ is without fault, and only being on his side can we be acquitted. To have a righteous life doesn't mean we're sinless or have perfect obedience. Righteousness with him means we begin to think the way Christ thinks. And when we have his mind, we think of those things that are good, honorable, and loving. God knows all of our disobedience and rebellion, and he is still willing to work through us and meet us where we are. We are saved by grace after all we can do, because it's humanly impossible to do it on our own. And all we can do is nothing more than believe and have faith. If it were possible to be perfect on our own, we wouldn't need Christ. But perfection is impossible in the mortal state without God. So what do you do when you've missed the boat? When you're disappointed by life? Figure you weren't obedient enough, and you won't be. People who conclude they must be perfect in order to earn God's love are sadly living up to a disappointing belief. In Job 2:10, Job asks the question, "Shall we indeed accept only good from God and not also accept adversity and disaster?" This question tells us Job understood that a righteous life doesn't mean that everything always runs smoothly. Be thankful in spite of the rain and the north wind. Be thankful that God has taken you through this trial, and He'll do the same again. All God promises us is that He'll be with us as we go through the trials of life. We'll have problems if we're obedient believers. We'll have problems if we're non-believers. But for believers, there is peace in the middle of the storm. When a believer has faith, they are under the law of grace. If a person is not found under the law of grace, then they're found under the law of justice. I wish you the best in your happy readings. Thank you for joining me.